So the last major feature we have in the latest version of Dt6 is this added feature called SAM, which stands for the System Alarm Monitor. And it's just another way to get data like the acquire in the live mode. But the SAM mode is a much more complex way to start, but in the end you get a much larger sort of understanding of how your machine's working. Because the SAM mode basically lets you set certain criteria that would cause a quote unquote failure, and then just run it for an extended period of time, and you can walk away from the machine and the software will record any time that a fault like that had passed your thresholds that you chose. And as of early testing, we've run it for several hours at a time and been given back the you know 30 to 60-second portions that were found to be having errors of some kind, and then then you can take that data and put it into our analysis and go from there and look at each individual portion that had some sort of fault. Why this is a useful feature is, excuse me, you can run the machine for, let's say you get in on work on a Friday night. You want to know what the machine's going to do over the weekend, so you set it up on a Friday evening, let it run. This will record any time there is a fault and save it to a normal text file. And then when you come back in on Monday, you can stop it and then just look at a folder, and it'll have all the text files of data that was quote unquote faulty in some way based on whatever criteria you put in. And then you can take those data, and if they're allowed to, they can be put together so you can get a much larger portion of data in a sequential format, and then you can import it and look at it accordingly. But it's also nice that it saves it as text files automatically. They're given the extension .sam, but they can be read by any normal text editor or Excel or MATLAB. So it gives you the added option of, one, being able to send it to someone easily. Two, you don't necessarily have to use the Dt6 software, my apologies, to analyze the data. So for instance, if you had some data and someone at your company was an expert with Excel, you could give them the data file. They could open it up in Excel just like normal, highlight all the data, and then do with it whatever they will. And it just gives you this, more of a kind of added benefit in that you're not restricted to just using this piece of software, but you can use other pieces of software that certain people might prefer. So we'll press the SAM guy. When you press the SAM button, you're given this option. This box basically tells you to either run the SAM, which runs the system alarm monitor where you set certain criteria, you can leave it, it saves all those text files, and then so on and so forth. And then once you have those text files, or if you've gotten them on a previous day or something, then you can go to the import SAM files and actually look at those files and choose which one to import and be analyzed in Dt6. So on any given day, you might not actually run this one because this is how you would get those files. But if you just want to look at some that you've already had, you would just go to the import SAM files. So if you want to have data be sent up to the Dt6, you have to run this one every time, but you don't necessarily have to run this one every time if you're just looking at old data. But I'm going to go ahead and run it because I don't have any old data to look at. I want to go ahead and rerun it on this machine. So we'll go ahead and run it. And when you first run it, you're given this dialog box that says, what would you like to name the folder to save all waveforms that were found to contain one of the alarms? So by default, it'll give you a folder name that is defaulted to be sensor alarm, and then the current month, day, year, hour, minute. So you can go ahead and use this default, or you can change it to whatever you want. But the files are always going to save in the directory, the C directory, and then the subdirectory update international, and then in a subdirectory called alarm data. So that's where these files are always going to be saved. So you could always just go and look at the same location for it. And I'm going to go ahead and say that this naming scheme is okay for me. I don't really need to change it, but you could go ahead and change it to whatever, like machine or turbine or plant one, or you could even go to the Dt6 units where you could say like unit train, so on and so forth. But for my intents and purposes, this is going to be good enough. So I'll hit OK, and then Once you do that, you're given this option to either use an existing alarm or to create a new one as a starting point. So if you hit no, you'll be given one to start from scratch, and you can go from there. Or you can use one that you've already created. So I've already created one that I'm going to start with. So hit yes, and I've already named it test 1. So we'll go ahead and click in on that guy. We'll hit OK. And then we're brought up with this Band-Aid alarm system. And if you go ahead and zoom these out, you can see how the that those bands are going to create certain signals. So basically, as of right now, in the one I've created, if we're, let's say, within the range of, on this guy, the 66 to just about 100 hertz range, if it's less than 0.1, it's going to be considered green, right? Which usually people would say green is okay, right? If it's between 0.1 and 0.12 within this frequency range, it would go ahead and record as yellow, so that would be another higher alarm. And then if it's between 0.12 and 0.15, we'd get orange. And then anything above 0.15 would be, red, like something has seriously gone wrong. One thing to keep in mind is it's usually good practice to leave a little bit of empty region to the left. That's just so that you don't have any low kind of offset setting it off. And right now it looks like it's all red, but if we actually go over there, you can see that this is the last region I have actually recorded. So anything to the left of this, because I don't have the ability to click there, that's all just going to be considered okay. It's not even going to try and look in that region. So it's a little misleading, just that the red would make you think that that would all be recorded as red, but if you can't actually go to the left, it means that the program isn't even going to consider that region, which is kind of what we want right now. So once I have all this, I'll go ahead and hit OK. And yep, I have an 1800 hertz motor and everything else. So we'll hit OK. And when we hit OK, we're brought up with a loading bar that tells us, the machine is running. It's trying to think right now. And sometimes you'll get this option that says unplug and plug back in. That basically just means the computer's for some reason or another has lost connection to the sensor, or that the sensor isn't plugged in at all. But all you have to do is unplug the sensor, then plug it back in, and you should get the computer should be able to recognize that again, and then go from there. And so once you know it's starting, you can actually see this time value ticking off every second, and so you know the machine is actually doing something. And then up here you can actually see it going through the states. So basically, the way this works is the software will analyze short second gaps of 6 seconds to determine if there's a fault present, and then if there is a fault present, it'll save that off as a long version, which is a much longer file. So you can see here's the last 6 seconds of data that came in, and we can say, oh, okay, like, here's another 6 seconds worth, right? Right now I don't have my machine running, so this is all basically just noise for both of them. So that's why you get a couple weird spikes every now and then. It's basically just noise from the sensor. It'll go away once you actually get real data, because the noise relative to any normal signal would be nothing. So based on those alarm settings before, I can actually choose which one I want to trigger on now. So if we put it to green, anything would be triggered as a fault, so it would save off every 30 seconds worth. I'm going to go ahead and say that anything bigger than a yellow I'm going to consider that to be a fault. And then, so this controls the frequency domain from that alarm data that we previously set. But then another option that we have is right here. It's called max min G's, and this just lets you look at, given this waveform right here, if there's a spike that's beyond plus 2G or minus 2G in this case, anywhere within this 6 second reading, it'll consider that a fault and go ahead and save it. So that just lets you be able to gather data if, for instance, there was a spike or something, or some sort of impulse anomaly. You'd be able to record that when a normal frequency plot wouldn't be able to catch that. Even at the low frequencies, it wouldn't show up. But I'm going to go ahead and say that anything beyond, let's see here, how about 4Gs is going to be a little off. So right now, I have all the settings running, right? And so far, you can see here that we haven't actually saved any files. So we can see here it says number of error files saved 0. So what that means is that so far, nothing has been either in the yellow region for our frequency, yellow or higher, or any portion of the waveform has been above 4Gs or below minus 4Gs. And we can just go ahead and confirm that here by saying that the lowest G currently found was negative 0.5, which if we actually look here was just from the noise of this white one. And the highest G's found so far was 0.5, which, is relative to this offset. But if we go ahead and actually turn on our motor now, we can actually see that this next set of data that comes in is going to actually be a little bit more realistic looking, as opposed to just being noise. So now you can see here's where it was off and here's where I have it on. And here's my 30 hertz FFT of what this guy looks like. And here's, now you can see that it actually found a fault there and it was actually red. So my machine's really off and it just went ahead and saved one of those files. So you can see here was me off and then here's the motor running and here's one of the files that just got saved off. And as long as this machine is outside of this yellow region, i.e. yellow, orange, or red, it's going to keep saving off files. Keep in mind though, this doesn't show the most recent one. This just shows since the start what was the highest alarm range that's been found. And my motor has a serious imbalance in it. The shaft is quite bent, so it's going to be a pretty terrible motor, so we're going to be at red. But more importantly also, you can see here that our max G's was actually more than 4Gs, so my machine is like really out of whack. In some cases it's been all the way up to 5Gs or so. That up to the user about whether some of these spikes are just from machine noise or induction noise or something, or if that's actually there. But I would go ahead and say that, this machine is really out of whack, so something's wrong. And so far we've already saved 3 files, and we could go ahead and keep going from here, but for what I'm going to use it for, I'm going to say this is good. You can see that I started it at 1:48, so roughly 5 minutes ago based on where we are now. So this is what, the current time is. This updates every second or so, not necessarily every second. And then here you can see when I first started. And then this guy just shows you for the file that just got saved when the first point came in for that specific graph. So in this case, the graph that's currently being displayed, the first point that we got for it was at 1:53 today and 24 seconds. But I'm going to go ahead and say this is okay, so I'll just hit the stop button, and then it'll take a couple seconds for it to finish saving everything off and go ahead and, stop. Now we're going to go ahead and actually show you how to use those files once you've gotten them. So when you first click on it, it'll pop up this option that says, do you need to unzip the system alarm folder, or has it already been unzipped? And when you first get data, the run portion saves that data into a zip file to keep the memory storage as small as possible. This is so that you could easily transfer that folder to a different computer if you wanted. And it's just to keep the actual tablet running at full speed and to not have to deal with more memory than it really has to. If you've already gone through the process of unzipping it, whether it's already been done in the past or you used another extracting software to unzip it, you could go ahead and just press this. But I haven't done any of that yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit the unzip button. So when you hit the unzip button, it'll go directly to that C Update International Alarm Data folder where they automatically get saved. And within that, you can see all the zip folders. So these are the ones that actually has data been saved in them. And then down here you can actually see the unzipped versions of those folders. So the first thing you're going to have to do is double click on a zipped one. If you've chosen this option, you haven't already unzipped it. So you'll just double click on the one you know it's found in. So I know that I just took this today, this guy right here. So I'm going to go ahead and double click it and unzip it. And it'll take a couple seconds for it to unzip everything. And then it'll open up a folder for you that contains those files. So we can actually go back up one level and you can see the zip folders. I'm actually sorting by that, so we can actually see here's the zip folder I just clicked on, and here's now another folder that has exactly the same name, but it's the unzipped version. So this is what we actually need. Any piece of software needs to be able to actually look at data. When it's in a zip form, you can't really do anything with it. But so we'll go back into here, and we have these 5 data sets that I got, and the names of these files are specifically made. So for all intents and purposes, don't try and rename these. The software analyzes this naming structure and actually converts this to a very specific thing. It's one of the ways the software understands when that time value came in, and more importantly, it understands if 2 sets of data are close enough together and they have overlapping portions that could be put together. So for instance, here we have October 24th for both of these, 2016. We have 1 o'clock, 51 minutes, and we have 23 seconds and 53 seconds. Anytime a file is between 29 to 31 seconds, it means that that 30 seconds data between them lines up perfectly, so there's no gaps between them. The reason it isn't always exactly 30 seconds is because of a rounding issue about how these names get made. If it was 23 seconds and like 0.001, and the next one was 53 seconds 0.9, that could be 31 seconds. So there could be a little bit of a rounding issue there sometimes. But for all intents and purposes, and we've tested this many times, if it's between 29 and 31 seconds apart, it means the 2 files came together at the same region and there's no gaps between them, so you could actually put them together if you wanted to. But I'm just going to go ahead and double click on this third one now to open it and actually look at it. So it'll load for a little bit, and then you can actually see that data. So up here we have the blue one, and down here we have the green guy. You can see, 58 seconds and 58 seconds. And we have these 2 cursors, and as you move one, it'll move the other. And then over here, that cursor region then creates what's between these 2 cursors. Will show you an FFT of what that looks like, just so you can kind of get an understanding of where you might want to trim it, because as you move it around, you can see that the graphs, the peaks kind of go up and down a little bit, and you would try and get it to the portion that has the highest amplitude. So in this case, I think that peak was highest right here, but if I bring it over a little bit, it's a little less. So I'm going to put it right here, and you can go ahead and center the cursor, but I'll just go ahead and bring it back to right there or something. And then you can see here that if I put it between 5 seconds and 25 seconds, that would be 20 seconds worth of data I have, right? And these FFT would show you the corresponding FFT of the region between, as I previously said. And so then once you have this, you have these 4 options here at the top. So the first one is output to Dt6, which is going to be what you're going to want to press if you want to go into the Dt6 and save off and be able to actually look at this region of data that's between here to here. So that would be how you would look at it in the higher Dt6 analysis software. You also have the option to output it to a text file. So if you press this guy, you can output this exact same thing as what's called system alarm cut waveform by default .sam. So then basically it'll save off a new SAM file of the region between here to here of both graphs. So that's useful if you have these long portions and you want to save off a pre-cut version that you're going to want to keep looking at. And that, you could use that if the motor was off and then it was on and you don't want to use the on portion, so you just trim it already and then you don't have to look at it again. And then you could save it wherever you want. So I'm going to go back to that folder I was in earlier, that 1024, where I got that file. And you can actually see here that this was the file I chose, and the way we know that is because it was on October 24, 2016, October 24, 2016 at 1:52 and 23 seconds, 1:52:23. So we know that this file, the first data point, was at this time, and that's figured out by the fact that we have that naming structure. But so I'm going to go ahead and say that this is just my first cut guy, and I'll just go ahead and save it there. And then it'll just, run for a little bit, and it won't automatically import that, just in case you want to make a bunch of little cuts. So that'll just save it off as a SAM file, and then you could go ahead and run through this process again and do it. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about the last and final feature that we have in the interleave portion. So, or in the SAM portion, which is called interleave. So basically, you can actually take all the SAM files, and the software can determine all of the ones that you've selected if they could actually be combined into a file that contains all of them. And to show you how that works, I'm going to first go ahead and just click on one of these old files and just import this middle region so you can see that this single file. So this guy is, I want to say it's about 55 seconds long, right? But if I go ahead and create interleave, then I click on that folder, and then I hold the shift key and click all of these guys, and then we hit OK, what's going to happen is the software will analyze these time values and determine if they're all 30 seconds, 29 seconds, and 31 seconds apart, and then combine those together, meaning that it determined that there wasn't any gaps between them, so that data from one fits exactly in with the next one, and so on and so forth, in 30-second chunks, with a little bit of added portion on the end, or a little bit less, but it's about 30 seconds each. So in this case, we can actually look at it just roughly and say, well, this one was at 56:30, and the next one's at 57, so those are 30 seconds apart. And then the next two, it's 57 to 57:30, so those are 30 seconds apart. So if I go ahead and hit OK on this, all three of these are lining up perfectly with one another. So we're going to get an output, we're going to get a new saved SAM file that contains all of those together in one, which makes it a little easier to deal with the entire portion that you want to look at. So we'll go ahead and hit OK, and then it'll come up with this loading bar, because it takes a little while to run for it. It's not too terribly long, but it is a little bit of a processor intensive thing. So then that file just got saved off as a new SAM file in that folder. So I'm going to go ahead and click already unzipped, because I want to actually look at that now. So here's that folder, and then now you can see there's one called interleave sensor alarm 10, 13, 16, 18, 56, 30. And basically what that is it gets the name of the first value that was created in that interleave. So in this case, it combined these three files, and the first one that got put in there in time-wise is the 10, 13, 16, 18, 56, 30, because that was the first time, and that's going to be the value of the first point in that portion. And if, for instance, we had more files and there was a bit of a gap between them, we would get more interleave files, and each name would be corresponding to the first file that's present within that. So we'll go ahead and double click this guy and open it up, and we can notice here that before it was like 58 seconds, and now we've actually gotten a bigger portion of our waveform. And we can go ahead and trim it wherever we want and say, okay, well, let's trim it at 60 seconds right there. That looks good. And here's our FFT, and then we can go ahead and say, okay, now that we have a portion of data that's 60 seconds long, plenty of time to get within a 1 RPM resolution on an FFT graph, we could go ahead and hit the output to Dt6 button, which is the one that we were missing before. So when you press that, now this green light has turned on, which means that there's data ready to be sent to the Dt6 as if you had just acquired it. So once this is green, data's there, you can hit exit.